Hello everyone. Today we will be discussing Johann Christoph Friedrich von Schiller's play William Tell. Johann Christoph Friedrich von Schiller was born at Marbach, Württemberg, Germany on the 10th of November 1759. His father had served both as a surgeon and a soldier in the War of the Austrian Succession, and at that time of the poet's birth held a position under the Duke of Württemberg. Friedrich's education was begun with a view to holy orders, but this idea was given up when he was placed in the military academy established by the Duke. He tried the study of law and then of medicine, but his tastes were literary, and while holding a position as regimental surgeon, he wrote his revolutionary drama The Robbers, which brought down on him the displeasure of his ducal master. Finding the interference with his personal liberty intolerable, he finally fled from the duchy and, in various retreats, went on with his dramatic work. Later, he turned to philosophy and history, and through his book on the Revolt of the Netherlands, he was appointed Professor Extraordinarius at Jena in 1789. His History of the 30 Years' War appeared in 1790–93, and in 1794 began his intimate relationship with Goethe, beside whom he lived in Weimar from 1799 till his death in 1805. His lyrical poems were produced throughout his career, but his last period was most prolific, both in these and in dramatic composition, and includes such great works as his Wallenstein, Mary Stuart, The Maid of Orleans, The Bride of Messina, and William Tell. His life was a continual struggle against ill health and unfavorable circumstances, but he maintained to the end the spirit of independence and love for liberty, which are the characteristic marks of his later writings. This enthusiasm for freedom is well illuminated in William Tell, the most widely popular of his plays. It is based upon a worldwide legend which became localized in Switzerland in the 15th century and was incorporated into the history of the struggle of the forest cantors for deliverance from Austrian domination. It united with the theme of liberty that of the beauty of life in primitive natural conditions. Both its likeness and differences illustrates Schiller's attitude towards the principles of the French Revolution. William Tell was not the result of the author's imaginative creation alone. The Tell story had long before been enmeshed within the fabric of the Swiss national heritage. In this section, we find a few sources of the story which will be discussed further. The motifs central to the legend of William Tell can be traced back to numerous sources. For the incident of shooting of the apple by a skillful marksman, there are about 26 different sources. Other sources to which Tell legend can be traced back include the motifs found in early Icelandic literature and popular children's ballads found in both Scottish and English literature. This theme has also been prevalent among the oral folklore of the Germanic and Norse people. Other literatures which have used a similar theme include the Norwegians, Germans, Russians, Finnish, Turkish, and Persian traditions. Similar apple shooting themes wherein the protagonist confesses his intentions of shooting the person in power and committing regicide has been recounted in Danish literature as well. The motive of Tell's leap to freedom has also been recounted in earlier versions of the story. A Swiss treatment of the subject by Andreas Hülsler terminates with the comment that while the historical validity of the tell material is unclear, it is quite apparent that the Tell-Gessler-Appelfschuss incidents are part of a corpus of stories about marksmen and are a clear example of a migratory story or wander fable, for the complete prototype of the tell story is to be found in Bulgarian, Romanian, Hungarian and gypsy tales of master marksmen. Nonetheless, it is believed that Schiller based his account of the attainment of Swiss freedom on a Swiss history, which in turn drew from 15th and 16th century chronicles. Gustav Roeth is more concerned with dramatic parallels and concludes his works by saying that Schiller must have consulted at least 3 earlier plays to come back full circle. Friedrich is content to see as Schiller's inspiration 2 Swiss chronicles. The only indisputable fact is that in William Tell, Schiller chose to immortalize the Swiss historian Johannes von Müller of Schaffhausen. In view of this variety of possible sources, there seems little justification for assuming that out of the welter of variable traditions heralded by song, legend, popular play and history, Schiller saw fit to limit his search for dramatic materials to Swiss chronicles or the Volksartikel alone. The play starts with a scene on the shores of Lake of Lucerne opposite Schwyz. The fisher boy, the herdsman and the chamois hunter are all singing different variations of the same song, Rance des Vaches. Baumgarten comes running to them after killing the imperial seneschal of Rossburg, who had tried to dishonor Baumgarten's wife. He is being pursued by the viceroy's men. To escape to his freedom, he asks the fisherman to row him across the lake. But the lake is being filled with the dreaded Whale King or mist from the mountains and the fawn. It heralds the arrival of stormy weather, which would render the navigation of the river impossible. The fisherman expresses his inability to help Baumgarten. At this moment, William Tell enters the scene. After much debate about rowing across the lake, Tell volunteers to ferry Baumgarten to the other side. Meanwhile, the viceroy's men come and plunder the herds and the huts of the shepherd and the fisherman as they helped the murderer to escape. The scene ends with a cry of getting deliverance from the tyranny which prevails in the land. The second scene starts in the house of Werner, a free nobleman of Switzerland. He sits in contemplation over the current living conditions and is interrupted by his wife, who demands a share of his discomfort by dint of being his wife. The viceroy and his men had come riding the previous day and expressed their discontent on seeing a house so well built which did not belong to the emperor. Gessler hates Werner for this very reason, since he cannot bear to see anybody happy and free on their ancestral land. At this juncture, Gertrude, Werner's wife, suggests him to correspond with his acquaintances in Unterwald. The scene ends with husband and wife leaving while Tell enters with Baumgarten, who prods him to enter Werner Stauffacher's home for refuge. The next scene starts with Tell and Stauffacher reaching a common near Altdorf, where a castle was in progress. It is the keep of Uri, which is being built as a symbol of the emperor's power. While they are talking, a crier enters bearing a pole with a cap on top. It is proclaimed that anybody passing the place should pay obeisance to it, as it represented the Lord Governor. Tell and Stauffacher part ways, with Tell promising to be there when the time comes for action. The scene ends with the death of a person when a section of the under construction roof collapses. We are here introduced to the character of Bertha as well. In the next scene, we find Arnold Metschel and Walter Fürst, William Tell's father-in-law, who is discussing about the atrocities of the Viceroy's soldiers towards the cattle of the land, as well in punishment of the people's deeds. After Metschel leaves, Stauffacher enters the scene. They discuss about the building of the castle which was in progress. This is symbolic of the oppression which was going on in all corners of Switzerland, starting from Unterwalden to Rossburg. They discuss the various atrocities which are being committed in all quarters of the country. Stauffacher also describes how the soldiers blinded the old father of Arnold von Metschel for their refusal to bow to the will of Landenberg. Metschel rushes out on hearing the injustice done to his father. It is then that they discuss about the ancient bond which binds the three cantons of Uri, Unterwald and Schweiz. The three men then decide to rally their forces and gather together other notable people who are most likely to draw more people into the noble cause. The men also decide to meet up next on the left bank of the river at a meadow which is known as the Rutli. The act ends with their forging an alliance to fight the evil which has gripped the country. Act 2 begins at the mansion of the Baron of Attinghausen. We are introduced to Ulrich of Rudenz, who is an Austrian knight. He refuses to partake in the tradition of the house, wherein the servants swear their allegiance to the Baron in times of need. The young Rudenz is also chided by his uncle for being an alien to the cause of the Swiss and for joining hands with the Austrian tyrant. But Rudenz genuinely believes in the authority of the monarch and despises the ancient traditions of the Baron's household. Attinghausen then implores upon him to visit Lake Lucerne, the Rutli, and understand the true condition of Switzerland. The young Rudenz refuses and leaves. The next scene begins with people meeting at the Rutli. Arnold von Metschel talks to Stauffacher about taking revenge for the treatment meted out to his old father. He also gives information about the emperor's strongholds which are situated in the fortresses of Rosenberg and Sarnen. Everybody gets acquainted with each other from the three cantons. Schweiz is declared foremost among the three cantons for the present enterprise, and Herr Redding is declared the chief of the Diet. The party contemplates upon the condition of Switzerland and declares its purpose to rid Switzerland of Austrian domination, but with as little bloodshed as possible. It is also decided that Rossburg and Sarnen should be secured to turn the battle into the favor of the Swiss. The party parts ways with a hope for a better future for Switzerland, devoid of the tyranny of Austria. The next act begins in front of William Tell's home. It is a happy household scene with children running around doing their business. Hedwig, William Tell's wife, is aware of the confederacy formed at Rutley and asks her husband to be careful. Tell then leaves for Altdorf to visit Hedwig's father along with his son Walter. In the next scene, we are taken to a silent part of the forest where Bertha is met by Rudens. He proposes to her and is refuted on the grounds of his misplaced loyalty to Austria rather than to his home, Switzerland. Although herself an Austrian by birth, she then implored on him to rekindle the love for his country, which would then bring the two of them closer together. Act 3, Scene 3 is set in a meadow near Altdorf, where William Tell has gone to visit his father-in-law. Gessler's cap has been placed here on a pole for the people to pay obeisance to it. William Tell enters unmindful of the situation and is stopped by the soldiers posted there. He is told to bow down to the cap. Tell refuses and is declared a traitor for it and sentenced to prison. At this moment, the viceroy enters the scene and is informed about the situation at hand. Gessler then asks Tell to show off his skills with the bow and to shoot an apple placed on his son's head. William Tell implores the viceroy to not assign such a daunting task, but to no avail. Tell is forced to shoot the apple placed on his son's head. He takes position and places one arrow at his belt and sets the other to the bow. He succeeds in the attempt. Yet, Gessler does not leave him at peace and inquires about the presence of the second arrow. A confused Tell answers that it was a custom with archers, but Gessler does not accept the answer and Tell is forced to confess that the second arrow was for the viceroy himself, had Tell failed to shoot the apple. Thereafter, William Tell is forcibly taken into custody to be delivered to the prison in Kussnacht. Act 4 of the play is set on the eastern shores of Lake Lucerne. Everybody is discussing the incident of William Tell's capture. People are scared of the viceroy's anger and all fear for Tell's safety. Meanwhile, there is a storm brewing and a ship is seen in the distance struggling to keep afloat in this turbulent weather. It is ready to dash into pieces against the sharp rocks along the banks of the lake. All of a sudden, William Tell enters the stage, crossbow in hand, looking wildly around. The fisherman and his boy inquire about his escape from the wretched vessel. Tell informed them about how Gessler asked him to navigate the ship through the waters when all hope was lost. Tell helped and finally, when the chance arose, jumped off the ship and into his freedom. Finally, Tell thanks the fisherman for the hospitality and asks him to send word to his wife about his safety and his return to freedom. In the mansion of Attinghausen, the Baron lies in the throes of death with his faithful servants and well-wishers surrounding him. Hedwig is reunited with her son Walter over here. She is happy, but at the same time distraught, as her husband had to point an arrow towards their child. In her anguish, she also chides Baumgarten for forsaking his friend and allowing him to be sent to prison. The Baron now awakens for a little while and asks for his nephew Rudens. He is also informed of the uniting of the three cantos in the ancient bond. He is also informed of the plans to overtake the fortresses of Rossburg and Sarnen. Finally, after a burst of patriotism, the Baron dies in peace. At this very moment, Rudens enters and is aghast at the sight of his uncle's death. He repents for his mistake and is soon indicted into the confederacy of the ancient bond. He also takes up charge of the group, being its rightful leader. He also informs them of the capture of Bertha and implores the people to first help him to rescue her. In the next scene, we find William Tell with his crossbow waiting on the road to Kusnacht. He lies in wait for an opportune moment to kill Gessler, who had made Tell commit the heinous crime of aiming at his own child. Gessler arrives at the scene and shows no mercy to a woman who begs for his mercy to save her husband's life. Gessler remains his haughty self and denies her. At that very moment, Tell takes his shot and Gessler slides down dead from his horse. The tyranny is finally ended. In the final act of the play, the battle is won. The three cantos fight together and the symbols of tyranny are destroyed forever. Bertha has also been saved from the jaws of death in a fire which had engulfed the building in which she was being held captive. The symbol of tyranny, the cap of Gessler, has also been brought down. News of the emperor's murder by his nephew, Duke John of Austria, also reaches the party, who in turn are happy that at least one of their problems has lessened. In the next scene, we find Duke John in the disguise of a monk and full of anguish, taking shelter in Tell's home, who has no other choice but to send him away after giving him food. This happens because a murderer who committed crime for greed cannot be given shelter. He sends him off to St. Peter's city in Italy. Finally, the play ends with everybody praising Tell for his bravery. Bertha and Rudens are also united and Switzerland gets her freedom from Austria. The play centers around the characters of Gessler and William Tell. The disdainful attitude of the Viceroy is brought face to face with the courage and resilience of William Tell, who is symbolic of freedom for the entire Swiss nation. The return of the prodigal son is evident from the episode of Rudens, who ultimately realizes where his heart lies and fights for his homeland. The sea change which he undergoes is brought about by Bertha, an Austrian by birth, but who feels dearly for the Swiss cause. Other important characters who form a part of the central theme include Baumgarten, whose first defiance against the atrocities meted to the Swiss sets the course of action of the ensuing incidents. This play has three important subplots. The first one is related to the incidents involving William Tell the character. It includes all those episodes wherein the protagonist had to get into an altercation with the figures of authority. These included the first escape from the Viceroy's soldiers, the shooting of the apple, and finally the killing of Gessler himself. Apart from this, a bit of the family life and ideology of Tell has also been explained. The second plot is chiefly political in tone and includes the confederacy formed by the three cantons involving Stauffer, Walter Fürst and Arnold von Metschel. The Austrian side is represented by Gessler and his entourage. The third important part is the love story of Bertha and Rudens. Set in the backdrop of the Revolution, it is a true depiction of the power play and ultimate return of the prodigal son back into the folds of his motherland. Once again, this theme successfully depicts the adage, behind every successful man there is the hand of a woman. On a different note, the incident of the shooting of the apple, which was placed on the son's head, has been considered to be symbolic of the descent between Schiller and his own father. The character of William Tell has also been equated with the image of God by yet other critics. Tell here is then the God who, with the use of his crossbow, is out to cleanse the world of all the vile, personified by Gessler. The language used in the play depicts a vivid imagery of the contemporary times. The importance of nature in the life of the Swiss people is also evident from a reading of the various names given to the winds and rocks found in the vicinity of the Lake of Lucerne. The role of nature becomes all the more important as it has been depicted by the author that every time there is an escape from the clutches of tyranny, nature comes to the rescue of the Swiss, while it is this very same nature which sounds a peril for the tyrants who seem to have come to conquer both the home and the hearth. With this, we come to the end of this session. Hope you enjoyed it. See you next time. Thank you.